I'm going to cut apart both of these sneakers to figure out which of these old school brands in Vans and Converse makes the best leather version of some of their classic sneakers, and to really figure out if any of these are even real leather, if they're decent leather, and if they're worth spending a little bit extra money to get the leather versions. I apologize for the lack of videos. Our first week back, everybody was sick but me and Brody, and so me and Brody basically had to run the entire production side of the business. And then the next week I got COVID and lost my voice for a week and a half, and it's still not all the way back, but at least I can record and hopefully my voice lasts through this video. We'll find out. But I appreciate your guys' patience and your support. 2021 was a crazy year, and 2022 is going to be even better. It's going to be a really fun year. The World War II boot series starts pretty soon. We're going to be doing more sneakers more often, and we just got a lot of really fun stuff planned. So thank you guys so much for your support. And the idea behind this video isn't necessarily to review these sneakers through and through, because we've already cut apart a few pairs of Converse and Vans, and they're probably going to be built about the same as those other videos. So I'll link those below and in the cards if you want to watch those. We're going to be more specifically looking at the leather itself and what kind of leather it is, what quality it is, and if it's a durable enough leather to justify buying the leather version of the sneaker, or if it's just a cheap, terrible leather that's just going to be as durable as a canvas version of the sneaker. So now let's go over the shoe information for each of these. So let's start with the Converse. So the brand is Converse, the style is the Chuck Taylor All-Star Leather. The colorway is black and white. They weigh 12 ounces. They retail for $60, and they're made in Vietnam. And the leather of this Converse, it feels really, really fake. And I can't even tell if it's got to be real leather just because they say it is, and it's on the little tag on the inside, but it doesn't feel like a very real leather. I'm curious to see how much of this top layer is just a polyurethane coating, because it's clearly a fake print embossed into the top with the polyurethane coating on top, and it feels like a really thin leather, which is good and bad, because the thinner the leather, the easier it is to break in and the easier it is to wear, but the less durable it is. And especially if it's got a really thick plastic coating on top, that eventually starts flaking off and splitting. And if you don't have a good thick leather backing it, that split will go all the way through the leather. As for the type of leather, it's a chrome tan leather, especially for this price point. There's really no way it's a veg tan leather, and it makes more sense for it to be a chrome tan, because chrome tan is a lot cheaper, it's a little bit more durable, and it doesn't take quite as much upkeep. So for $60, it's definitely a chrome tan leather. And the lining of the shoe is just like all the other Converse, with the canvas lining that I really like. The construction is just like all the other Converse as well, with a vulcanized construction where before all the rubber's cured, they wrap all this foxing around it and then cure it all together to create a bond. So it's not necessarily glued, it's all kind of fused together in the curing process of the rubber. The insole is just that classic Converse insole where you've got the non-removable dual density insole with the canvas on top. And the outsole is rubber, but unlike the regular Converse that have that little felt texture on the bottom, this one is just straight rubber all the way through. And if you don't know why Converse does that felt bottom, it's a pretty interesting thing, because they add that on the bottom so that when they import it, they can classify it as a slipper rather than a sneaker, because that lowers the tariffs and the import fees, because I guess they're a lot higher for sneakers rather than slippers. So they throw a little felt on the bottom, classify them as slippers, so they get them in here for cheaper and are able to sell them for cheaper, or at least increase their margins. But this one doesn't have it, which I thought was kind of interesting. And maybe it's because it's harder to classify something as a slipper if it has leather in the upper, and so it wasn't worth trying to classify it as a slipper and put the felt on the bottom. But I thought that was kind of an interesting detail. And then to the Vans. So the brand is Vans, the style is the made for the maker authentic. The color is black. They weigh 14 ounces. They retail for $85, which is $25 more than the Converse, and they're made in Vietnam. The leather on the Vans seems like it's a little bit higher quality leather, and it feels like it's a little bit thicker too. It's a chrome tanned leather, and just like the Converse, it does have a pretty thick coating on top. It maybe doesn't have quite as thick as the Converse, but we'll see when we get it cut in half. But this is not the natural grain pattern that you see with the higher quality leather. This is some sort of polyurethane coating that they call Vans Guard, which is basically just a spin version of saying, well, we put plastic on top so it makes it more spill resistant and water resistant, but in all reality it's just a spin on the way that they're putting a fake coating on top of their leather. But it does make it more water resistant. We'll do a water resistance test before we cut these in half, but right off the bat it seems like the Vans is a little bit thicker, a little bit higher quality, a little more resilient, and just the density of the leather. It doesn't feel quite as foamy and cheap. As for the lining of the Vans, it's a polyester moisture wicking lining. I think I would still prefer the canvas in the Converse, just because I think it'd be a little bit more abrasion resistant, especially in that heel where you get a lot of heel slip and wear that heel out. I'd be willing to bet the counter cover in the Converse is going to last longer. The construction is also a vulcanized construction like most of the Vans, and the insole is a removable Ultra Cush insole. It doesn't feel like it's quite as nice as the Comfy Cush outsole. This feels more like the consistency of like packing peanuts rather than like a memory foam, but it is a little bit squishier and softer than the Converse is. So I would prefer that over the Converse personally, and it's removable, so you can always slip in your orthotics or a little bit more comfy or thinner one if you want. And the outsole on these Vans is rubber as well, and it feels like it's a little bit thicker than the Converse, so we'll see when we get it cut in half. But to really see what type of leather this is and how thick they really are, we need to cut them in half. But first, let's do a quick waterproof test.
Round one, fight! Uppercut! Shoryuken! Perfect! You win!
So as you can see, the water beat it up on both of these really well, and it's because there is that heavy coating on top, which is part of why people like these leather shoes, especially for the service industry, because if you spill stuff on it or you get them wet, it's gonna be easy to wipe off, and it's not gonna absorb into your shoe, especially if you've got ketchup and mayo. If you're in like the restaurant industry, a lot of people like these leather shoes for that specific reason. So now it's time to really figure out what these leathers are by cut them in half, so let's get them chopped. Okay, we got them chopped. Let's see what's inside after this boy moves right here. Starting with the Converse. Then to the Vans. So both of these are basically identical to their regular canvas version counterparts. So we won't go through all those details because they're basically the same. We've covered it in the previous videos that I'll put below. As for the leather information, if we put the caliper on the Converse, they come in at about 1.5 millimeters thick, which is pretty thin, but it's not crazy thin for a sneaker. It's definitely on the thinner side. Compared to the Vans though, if we put it on here, the Vans are about 2 millimeters thick, so half a millimeter thicker. And if you look really closely at the cross section, you can see that the Vans do have some of that grain pattern that is associated with a higher quality leather. And if you don't know, that cross section of a piece of leather, that very top part of the grain is what people associate with that smooth, higher quality leather that's not suede. It's that part of the leather that binds all the fibrous bits together that gives leather its strength and its durability. And even though this leather has a polyurethane coating on top, it still retains that strength of that grain pattern on the very top bit underneath the polyurethane. If we look at the Converse looks like it does have just a little bit of that grain pattern as well, just not quite as much. So I'm guessing that the Vans is pretty close to a full grain leather with a good amount of that grain pattern in there. The Converse, on the other hand, is probably more of a top grain where they've sanded off a large portion of that grain to get a nice even leather that then they can put that coating on top and emboss this pebbled print on top. Just from the cross section alone, the Vans is a little bit higher quality leather and the Converse is a little bit cheaper of a leather. And the thickness as well. The Vans is a little bit thicker, a little bit more durable, a little bit higher quality than the Converse, which is a little bit more thin. But it's also a trade-off because these Vans might be a little bit harder to break in because of that thickness of leather. But I don't think it's enough to justify wanting a thinner leather. I would still rather have the thicker leather in the Vans. And then as for that top coating of polyurethane, if we just take this little scratch awl and scratch some of that polyurethane off, you can see how it flakes up and starts separating from that top layer of leather. And that's the big thing I don't like about any coated leather that has a really heavy finish on top, because as you start wearing these and you start flexing them, see how that kind of bubbles up and starts getting a little bit loose. It's only a matter of time before that top coat starts flaking off and these shoes look terrible. That's why I much prefer an unfinished leather, because the more that you wear an unfinished leather with that grain in the leather, it's never going to flake off like a fake coated leather is going to. And same thing with the Converse. If we just give this a little scratch, you can see how that top layer of polyurethane is easily just flaked off and starts to look really nasty. So for abrasion resistance, I don't like that polyurethane coating. For the overall look, I don't like the polyurethane coating. And some people might say, well, the Vans, they put that on top to make it more water resistant. And the thing is, you can make most leathers just as water resistant by putting a waterproof treatment on top. And once this polyurethane layer starts splitting and cracking, your water resistance is gone anyway. So both of these leathers are not the highest quality leather, but they're also not a $300 sneaker. They're under $100. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that the Vans are $25 more expensive. So overall, which of these two has the higher quality leather? I think the Vans is a lot higher quality. It's thicker, it has less of a coating on top, it's not quite as heavily embossed, it has more of that grain pattern that's gonna give you the longevity and strength in your sneaker. And the Converse is just a really thin, cheap leather that just barely has any grain in it at all. And it's only a matter of time before that top coating really starts flaking off and splitting. So I would go with Vans.
You win.
So to me, Vans has the higher quality leather in their leather version of their classic sneakers. So let me know what you guys thought and what else you want us to compare. My voice barely made it through this video, so hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, and hopefully we'll be back to regular schedule. I hope my voice comes back and everything gets back on the right track, because the 2022 should be a pretty good year. So I thank you guys again for all your support. It's been really fun. I'm excited for what's going to come up next. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, because that's the #1 thing you can do that's completely free, that helps build the channel, helps us get more sponsors, and helps us grow this channel to do whatever you guys want us to do. So thank you guys. See ya. Unwit